My wife spent 8 months planning to take my house out from under me. So the day she drove home, I let her pull into an empty driveway, a dark porch, and a lock that no longer recognized her key. I never said a word. I didn't need to. My name is Wilson Mark. I'm 38 years old, a structural engineer here in Charlotte, North Carolina, the kind of man who spends his days reading blueprints and stress points, calculating exactly how much weight something can carry before it cracks. I never once thought that skill would end up applying to my own marriage. My wife's name is Clara Wilson. We'd been together 11 years, married for 9 of them, with 2 kids who still believed their parents were the kind of solid you build a life around. I believed it too. Right up until the night I wasn't supposed to hear what I heard. I came home early that Thursday, still in my work boots, the smell of concrete dust on my jacket. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a voicemail, the kind that transcribes itself onto the lock screen before you even open it. Clara's name at the top. Except the message wasn't for me. She'd meant to call her sister and hit my contact instead, some cruel accident of a phone that knew her thumbs better than she did that day. I stood in the garage, engine still ticking as it cooled, and read 3 lines of a transcript that stopped my breath in my chest. My own wife's voice, flattened into text, calling me the biggest disappointment of her life. I didn't move for a long moment. The garage light buzzed overhead, that same yellow hum I'd heard 1,000 times without noticing it. I noticed it now. Somewhere behind me, past the kitchen door, I could hear her humming while she cooked dinner, oblivious, like nothing in the world had shifted. I thought about my father then, how he would have slammed the door off its hinges, screamed the house down. I swore a long time ago I'd never be him. So I did the only thing my training had ever taught me to do when a structure showed a crack. I stayed still. I watched. And I started counting exactly how much weight this marriage could take before something gave way. I walked into that kitchen with a smile I didn't feel, and Clara turned from the stove and kissed me like nothing in the world had changed. That's the part nobody warns you about, how easy it is to fake normal once you decide to. I set my keys on the counter the same place I always did, asked about her day the same way I always did, and underneath all of it I was running numbers. The way I run numbers on a bridge that's been reported for cracking but hasn't fallen yet. My father used to explode over nothing, a burnt dinner, a missed call, a look he didn't like. I spent my whole childhood flinching at doors slamming, and I promised myself in some unspoken way that I'd never be a man who let his anger choose for him. So I sat down at that table and ate pot roast I couldn't taste, and I gripped my fork hard enough that my knuckles went white, and Clara never noticed because she wasn't looking at my hands. She was looking at her phone, texting someone under the table, thumbs quick and practiced in a way that told me this wasn't new. The kids talked about school. Our son wanted to know if we could get a dog. Clara laughed at something on her screen and then caught herself and looked up, guilty for half a second before she smoothed it into a smile aimed at me. I smiled back. Later that night, lying next to her in the dark, I listened to her breathing even out into sleep, and I thought about the voicemail again, replaying it like a recording stuck on loop. Biggest disappointment of her life. 11 years, 2 kids, a house we built together, and somewhere along the way I'd become something she said behind my back instead of to my face. I didn't wake her up. I didn't ask her what she meant. I lay there in the dark calculating load limits, the same way I would for a beam that's been carrying more than it was ever rated for, waiting to see exactly where the first hairline crack would show itself. Clara's sister Renata lived 20 minutes away in a small house with a porch swing that needed oiling, and I showed up on a Saturday morning with a 6-pack of the beer her husband liked, pretending I'd just been in the neighborhood. Renata wasn't stupid. She raised an eyebrow at me before she even opened the screen door all the way, like she already knew I hadn't come for small talk. We sat on that porch and I asked careful, sideways questions. How's Clara doing? Has she seemed stressed? Is everything okay with her? The kind of questions a man asks when he already suspects the answer will hurt. Renata went quiet for a while, turning her beer bottle in slow circles on the armrest. Then she said it wasn't just one voicemail. Clara had been saying things for months. Venting, Renata called it, though the word sounded thin even as she said it. She told me about a promotion Clara had turned down years back, right around the time I got the offer to move us to Charlotte for the job that built our whole life. Clara never mentioned it to me. Not once, not in 9 years of marriage. She'd folded her own ambition into a box and put it away for my career, and apparently she'd never stopped resenting the shape of that decision. I sat there feeling something shift under my ribs, some old beam I hadn't known was load-bearing. I asked Renata what else there was. She looked out at the yard for a long moment, the porch swing creaking under her weight, and said there was more, but that it wasn't hers to tell, that I'd have to get it from Clara myself, if Clara ever decided to be honest with me. I thanked her for the beer she hadn't even opened yet and drove home with both hands tight on the wheel, replaying that word, more, like a splinter I couldn't stop touching. I didn't know yet how deep it went. I only knew the structure I'd trusted for 11 years had more cracks in it than I'd ever been shown. It was almost midnight when I noticed the lock. Clara's home office had always been an open room, a desk, a filing cabinet, a shelf of books she never finished. But the bottom drawer of that filing cabinet now had a small brass padlock threaded through the handle, new enough that I could still see the manufacturer's sticker half peeled on the side. I didn't touch it. 11 years of marriage teaches you things, and one thing it taught me was that Clara noticed when things moved even a half-inch out of place. So I stood there in the dark with my phone flashlight angled low, and I photographed the lock from 3 angles, noted the brand stamped into the metal, filed it away the same way I'd file away a stress fracture on a support beam before deciding how to address it. I thought about the drawer for days afterward, in meetings, on job sites, lying in bed next to a woman I was no longer sure I knew. My mind kept returning to something my father used to say, back when he was sober enough to say anything useful: you don't confront a wall until you know what's holding it up. He meant it about houses. I'd started applying it to marriages. I didn't ask Clara about the lock. I didn't ask her why a drawer that used to hold old tax documents and warranty papers had suddenly become important enough to secure. Instead, I did what I do best. I watched. I noted when she went into that office and how long she stayed, which was longer on the nights she thought I was asleep. I noted the particular way she'd glance toward the hallway before pulling a small brass key from a pocket I hadn't known she kept things in. Somewhere in the back of my mind, an old warning light had started blinking, the kind you get on a structure that's still standing but isn't standing right anymore. I didn't know yet what was behind that lock. I only knew that whatever it was, Clara had decided I wasn't allowed to see it, and that decision told me more than any voicemail ever could. I saw her through the window of a coffee shop on South Boulevard. On a Tuesday, I was supposed to be 40 miles away at a job site inspection that got cancelled last minute. I almost didn't stop. Some instinct made me pull into the lot across the street instead, cut the engine, and watch. Clara sat across from a man I didn't recognize. Mid-50s, gray suit, a leather folder on the table between them. My stomach dropped the way it does right before a controlled demolition, that half-second of silence before everything comes down. But there was nothing romantic in the way they sat. No lean-in, no lingering touch. It was tense in a different way, clipped and businesslike, Clara's shoulders squared like she was defending something. I sat in that parking lot for 20 minutes, engine off, watching my wife have a conversation with a stranger that looked less like an affair and more like a negotiation. When they finally stood, the man handed her the folder, and through the glass I caught 3 words printed on the tab before she slid it into her bag. Wilson, buyout terms. I didn't move. I didn't confront her in that parking lot the way some men might have. I sat there running the words over and over, buyout terms, trying to make them mean something other than what they obviously meant. Somewhere underneath the shock, a colder thought was already forming, the kind of thought an engineer has when a bridge inspection turns up something worse than expected. This wasn't infidelity. This was something with paperwork. I thought about my father's old gift again, the deed transfer he'd made years back as a wedding present, something he'd mentioned once in passing and I'd never bothered to read the fine print on. I hadn't thought about it in years. Watching Clara walk to her car with that folder under her arm, I had the sudden, sick feeling that I was about to learn exactly what my father had signed away without telling me, and exactly what my wife had been planning to do with it. She left for her sister's on a Friday afternoon, and I told myself I wasn't going to do it, right up until the moment I was standing in front of that filing cabinet with a pair of bolt cutters from the garage. The lock gave easier than I expected. Some part of me had hoped it would put up more of a fight, like resistance might mean there was still something worth protecting on the other side. Inside the drawer, a folder thick with documents, bank statements from an account I'd never seen, and a copy of a property deed I recognized immediately, because I'd grown up in that house before it became ours. My father had signed it over to us as a wedding gift 9 years ago, one line of paperwork he'd mentioned once at Thanksgiving and never brought up again. I put both your names on it, figured that's fairest. I hadn't thought about that clause in years. Clara apparently had. The documents laid it out plainly. Because my father had structured the transfer the way he did, Clara held a legal claim to the property that could, under the right conditions, force a sale or a buyout regardless of what I wanted. She'd been building a case for 8 months, quietly moving money into a separate account, meeting with a lawyer, gathering exactly what she'd need to walk away with half of everything my father had built, using his own generosity as the lever. I sat on the office floor with that folder in my lap for a long time. The betrayal in the voicemail had been about words. This was about architecture, a structure Clara had been reinforcing in secret while I slept beside her every night, unaware I was living inside a house that had already, legally, started to come apart. I thought about my father, gone 3 years now, and the quiet pride he must have felt signing that deed, believing he was giving his son something solid. He'd meant it as a gift. Clara had turned it into a weapon, and I was the only one in the house who didn't know the blueprint had changed. I didn't yell when she got home. I decided that much already, sitting alone in that office with the folder closed in front of me like evidence I wasn't ready to present yet. When Clara walked in Sunday evening, tired from her sisters, I asked her to sit down at the kitchen table, and something in my voice must have told her this wasn't going to be an ordinary conversation, because she went still in a way I hadn't seen from her before. I asked her calm questions. Precise ones. "How's the new savings account?" I said, watching her face carefully, the way I'd watch a gauge for the first sign of strain. She blinked and said she didn't know what I meant. Lie number 1. I asked about the meeting on South Boulevard, the man in the gray suit, the folder with my name on it. She said it was nothing, just insurance stuff. Lie number 2. Then I set my phone on the table between us, screen lit with the transcript of a voicemail she'd never meant for me to see. Biggest disappointment of her life. She stared at it for a long moment, and when she finally spoke, she said she didn't remember saying that it must have been taken out of context. Lie number 3, and this one seemed to cost her something, because her hands started twisting a napkin into a tight rope on her lap. 3 lies in under 10 minutes, from a woman I'd shared a bed with for 9 years. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just watched her unravel one thread at a time under the weight of her own contradictions. The kitchen bulb overhead throwing a hard yellow light across the table like something out of an interrogation room neither of us had asked to be in. My father used to say a structure tells you everything if you're patient enough to watch it fail slowly instead of forcing it to collapse all at once. I sat there and let Clara collapse slowly, one lie at a time, and felt none of the satisfaction I'd expected to feel. The lies stopped somewhere around the 4th question, and what came after wasn't relief, exactly, just a kind of exhausted honesty that seemed to drain the color from her face. Clara told me there was no affair. There had never been anyone else in the way I'd feared. What there was, instead, was years of feeling invisible, feeling like the promotion she'd turned down for me had calcified into a resentment she never found the right moment to say out loud. So she'd said it to her sister instead, and eventually to a coworker who'd become something like a confidant. That coworker, she admitted, had gone through her own brutal divorce 2 years back, and had spent months coaching Clara through what she called protecting yourself first. Find a lawyer, move some money quietly, don't tell him anything until you have to. Clara said it like she was reciting someone else's plan back to me, and maybe in a way she was. 4 months of secret meetings with a lawyer. 8 months of a separate account growing behind my back. All of it dressed up as self-preservation, built on the bones of a deed my father had signed in good faith. I watched her cry at that kitchen table, and something in me that had been braced for rage all week found itself softening into something closer to pity, though not enough to erase what I now knew. She wasn't a monster. She was a woman who'd let resentment metastasize in silence for years instead of ever once sitting across from me and saying, "I gave something up for you and I need you to know that." I asked her why she never just told me. She said she didn't think I'd understand, that I'd get defensive, that I'd make it about the money instead of about her. Maybe she was right. I'll never know now, because she never gave either of us the chance to find out. She chose a lawyer's folder over a conversation, and by the time she was finally telling me the truth, I'd already stopped being sure I wanted to stay for it. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten her with anything. What I did was move faster than she expected, the same way you shore up a failing structure before you tell the building's owner how bad the damage really is. I met with my own lawyer that week, a quiet man 2 floors up from my office who spent an hour walking me through exactly what my father's deed did and didn't allow, and what I could do to protect the kids' stability while everything else got sorted out. I found a rental 8 minutes from the kids' school, signed the lease under my name alone, and told no one, not even Renata. On a Wednesday afternoon while Clara was at her sister's, the same porch where I'd first learned how deep this went, I had the essentials moved. The kids' clothes, their school bags, enough furniture to make a strange apartment feel like a room they'd recognize. I had the locks on the house changed that same afternoon, not out of spite, but because I needed one door in my life to close cleanly. I picked the kids up from school myself, told them we were staying somewhere new for a while, kept my voice steady even though nothing in my chest felt steady at all. They asked about their mother. I told them she'd see them soon, and I meant it, because whatever had broken between Clara and me, I wasn't going to let it break them too. Clara came home that evening to a driveway lit only by her own headlights, porch light off, her key sticking uselessly in a lock that no longer recognized it. I imagine she stood there a long moment before she understood. I wasn't there to see it. I only heard about it later, secondhand, the way you hear about a building you used to walk past every day, gone quiet, gone dark, standing empty where a family used to be. Weeks passed. I'm writing this from the new apartment now, my son and daughter asleep down the hall in beds we bought together on a Saturday that felt, strangely, like the first honest day I'd had in months. Clara texts sometimes. I read them and mostly don't answer, not out of cruelty, but because I still haven't found the words that would be true and kind at the same time. I think a lot about my father these days, about that deed he signed 9 years ago meaning to hand us something solid, never once imagining it would end up as the fault line under our whole marriage. I used to believe a gift like that could only ever be a gift. I know better now. The things people hand you out of love can still become the exact thing that breaks you, if you're not paying attention to how they're built. I think about anger too, and how close I came to letting it drive instead of watching it the way I watch a stress report, carefully, patiently, waiting to see where the real damage is before deciding what to fix and what to let fall. My father never learned that. I like to think I finally did, the night I chose an empty house over an empty argument. I was closing up the kitchen the other night, the kids asleep, when there was a knock at the door. It was late for visitors, later for the person standing on the other side of it, someone from Renata's life, someone I'd met maybe twice at a holiday dinner years back, wearing an expression I recognized immediately because I used to wear it myself not long ago. I thought I understood betrayal by now. I thought I'd learned every shape it could take. Standing in that doorway, looking at a face that clearly needed to tell me something about my sister-in-law's own marriage, I realized I hadn't even begun to understand the half of it. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like and share for more interesting stories.